Tonight to 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and the last section. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, we're going to read from verse 18 to 23. 1 Corinthians 3, 18 to 23. Let no man deceive himself. If any man among you seemeth to be wise in this world, let him become a fool, that he may be wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. For as it is written, He taketh the wise in their own craftiness. And again, the Lord knoweth the thoughts of the wise, that they are vain. Therefore, let no man glory in men, for all things are yours, whether Paul or Apollos, or Cephas, or the world, or life, or death, or things present, or things to come, all are yours, and ye are Christ's, and Christ is God's. Amen. And the Lord will bless His inspired word to our hearts. Oh, no water here? No? No. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Now in this Bible study, this is Bible study number 21 on the book of 1 Corinthians. And this section brings us to the end of the chapter 3. Out of all the things we've studied so far, and we're just beginning really on the book, there are a few main themes that have arisen. First of all, the theme that rises up is the problem of divisions in the church in Corinth, divisions over various teachers. This was a symptom of their worldliness, dividing up, thank you dear, and following various teachers. Then, after the problem of divisions, another theme rises up. The apostle gives a comparison of the gospel, and he compares it with worldly wisdom. And he makes it very clear that these two things, the gospel or the wisdom of God, which is the same thing, and worldly wisdom, they are both in opposition to each other. They don't work together. The gospel is foolishness and offensive to the worldly wise. And the worldly wisdom of the worldly wise is foolishness to God. Yet this gospel, which is the wisdom of God, is not to be adjusted to suit the world and the world's wisdom or philosophy. It's not to be adjusted. We preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews, foolishness to the Greeks. It's not to be adjusted to suit what the world thinks, because the gospel itself is not foolish. It only appears foolish to the world, because the world's wisdom, the way they actually think, is actually not wisdom, but utter foolishness itself. Now, I hope to give a few examples of that towards the end of the messages tonight. God's wisdom has to be revealed. It is in the Bible. It needs to be illuminated by the Holy Spirit. Remember, we read that in chapter 2. Natural man receives not the things of the Spirit. They're foolishness unto him, neither can he know them. They're spiritually discerned. Spiritually. The illumination of the Holy Spirit upon the Word, that we become wise. We gain knowledge and wisdom. The natural man, the man that's not saved, not born again, dead in sin, he doesn't have the Holy Spirit. Therefore, he is wholly ignorant of true wisdom. That's why the new birth is essential. Now here at the end of chapter 3, the apostle comes back to this theme of human wisdom and divisions. The whole thing ties together. He's really dealing with one big argument in the 3 chapters. Because human wisdom or philosophy was the cause of the divisions. And he comes back to it all and he sums it all up and he says 3 or 4 things. 3 things I think it is. Number 1, he says, the path to true wisdom. Verse 18. If any man, let no man deceive himself. Let no man deceive himself. If any man among you seemeth to be wise in this world, let him become a fool, that he may be wise. Now, we note what it says there. If any man seemeth to be wise. See that word? That means he thinks himself wise. He thinks, oh, I'm very clever. Self-thinking. He thinks he's wise. After the wisdom of this world, it qualifies what it's talking about. He thinks himself wise after the wisdom of this world. In the world's eyes, according to the world's wisdom, humanism, he thinks he's very clever. If any man thinks himself to be worldly wise, let him become a fool, that he might be really wise. Now note what it doesn't say in the verse. It doesn't say, if any man is wise, let him become a fool. It doesn't say that at all. But if any man seems to be wise, if any man thinks he's wise, he has to renounce that in order to be truly wise. See, there's nothing worse than somebody who thinks, I'm really very clever, That's one thing that has to go before you can even become a Christian. Because that's pride. And to become a Christian, you have to be humble. You have to say, I don't have the answer to this. I am lost. I need Christ to save me. I don't have the wisdom. So it says in the verse then, let nobody deceive themselves. If they think they are wise and clever, they're not. In worldly wisdom, and of course, that is true. If you meet someone who thinks that they are clever and wise, it's a simple fact that they're not clever and wise. That's the way it is. They're a loudmouth and a waffler. That's what they are. But when you meet a truly wise man or woman, they will be actually humble. Because they know enough to know that they don't know everything that there is to know. I told you before about Dr. Morris Dowling in the Baptist College. He was a great lecturer. He spoke, I think it was either 17 or 19 other languages, including Russian fluently. He would fly to Moscow and he would teach Russians Hebrew in the language of Russian, and he didn't even have an accent. They thought he was Russian. He was a very clever man, and he lectured in the Baptist College, and he wasn't a relation to mine, despite the last name similarity, sadly not. But he said one time in our class, and this is what I told you before, that the more that you learn, the more you realize how little you know. That's a truly wise person that will say something like that. Because true wisdom is never proud, it's humble. So, if any man thinks himself to be wise, and then it says, according to the wisdom of this world, a person thinks they're worldly wise. Charles Hodge says, wise in this world is equivalent to being wise after the flesh. End of quote. The person thinks they're clever as to the world's ways of being clever, and they act accordingly. Some people, you see, they don't accept the gospel because they're too long in the tooth. I've heard that said. They think they know better. I'm too old now. I've seen too much, or too long in the tooth. And they don't accept the gospel. They know better. They're too wise in their own eyes to the world and its ways to accept the simple gospel. But that, brethren, is not wisdom. That is absolute foolishness to think that. Verse 18. If any man deceive himself, let no man deceive himself. If any man among you thinks himself to be wise in this world, let him become a fool, that he may be wise. Let him become a fool. This person that thinks they're wise, according to the wisdom of this world, let him become a fool. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that when we become a Christian, let's all become stupid and illogical and start doing stupid things and then call it wisdom. It doesn't mean that at all. Of course not. What it means is the person that thinks they're wise according to this world, let them become a fool in the eyes of the world, that they may actually be wise. And what does it mean to become a fool in the eyes of the world? It simply means to embrace and believe the gospel. That's what it means. Because we've read in chapter 1, verse 18, 20 and 23, that the world counts anyone who believes in the gospel foolish. That's what it means to become a fool. Renounce your worldly wisdom, believe the gospel, become a fool in the world's eyes to be truly wise. Therefore, those who believe the gospel are counted by the world as foolish. And we are. We must be. Wilson says, quote, "The cross is foolishness to the world, and he who espouses the cross is a fool in the world's opinion." End of quote. That's the teaching of chapter 1 of 1 Corinthians. Leon Morris, "The values of the Christian are simply foolishness to the man of the world." Chapter 2, verse 14. If anyone is to have real spiritual insight, he must become what the world calls a fool. The true wisdom is found in renouncing the mindset or the wisdom of this world. End of quote. So the path to true wisdom is to renounce the worthless wisdom of this world. And it is worthless. It's really dumb. It's daft. We must renounce it. And embrace and believe what the world calls foolishness. The gospel of God. So if you think, the verse teaches, if you think you're wise in the world's wisdom, believe the gospel and be saved. And it's the only way you'll be truly wise. So that's the first point, the path to wisdom, is believing the gospel. Or becoming a fool. It's the same thing. Secondly, the reason is verses 19 and 20. "For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God, for it is written, He taketh the wise in his own craftiness. And again, the Lord knoweth the thoughts of the wise, that they are vain." There's why we're to do this. Why the world's wisdom is foolish and so on. Foolishness. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. The Greek word means it is absurd or stupid. That's exactly what the Greek word means. So it's quite fine. It's, in a certain context, we can say what a person is saying is absurd. It is stupid. Because here it is in the Bible. God says the world's wisdom is stupid. It's absurd. The reason... the wisdom in this world is foolishness. It's absurd. It is stupidity to God and with God. And I think that Christians in the Western world give the world and the world's so-called wise people more credit than what they're due. Listen to this commentator. "Men must not think to be wise in both spheres. The church's wise are the world's fools. And vice versa, the world's wise are the church's fools." End of quote. We must see that. We must really see it, because there is a difference. It's opposition, complete opposition. And to me, the whole thing is very, very obvious. And I think it is to you too, if you've got the Holy Spirit inside you. See, when I look at a lot of the so-called wise in the United Kingdom, the leaders in the United Kingdom, I'm not impressed, are you? Really? And I honestly think I have never seen such a bunch of idiots. And I mean that. I'm not calling people names. That's honest. I really think they're absolutely daft. And I'm not saying that to deride them, but it's just that they seem so foolish. Look at the worldly wisdom in our country. It is foolishness. Look at their policies that they bring in. Disobedient children, for example. Let me give you a few. In schools, it used to be you got the cane if you were bad in school, and I got it more than once. Corporal punishment. They banned that even before I finished secondary school, along with virtually every other form of corporal punishment, until it comes to today when you're not even allowed to say that's wrong to a child. You're not even allowed to say naughty boy. But they banned all that and every other form of discipline. Now what has happened since they've done that in schools? Now some children wear Kelvar vests to school in England. Many of them, because there's that many stabbings. And teachers are assaulted and put in hospital every year since we banned corporal punishment. What has happened? We've now got real behavioural problems, and teaching has become a very hard job, and schools even dangerous for pupils. But if the worldly wise in our country get their way, as they're trying to in Wales and in Scotland, they're even going to trying to get parents banned from smacking their own children. They're going to criminalise that, make it a crime, where parents will go to jail. But you see the policy, they've done it. Look at the result. They've made it far worse. It's foolishness. Or take sex education. I've mentioned this before. Now, it's children. It used to be children as young as 7. Now it's as young as 5. They brought it in to curb teenage pregnancies. And at that time we had one of the lowest teenage pregnancy rates in Europe, in the United Kingdom. Now, 15 to 20 years later, it's actually about 30 years later now, Britain has the highest teenage pregnancy rate in the whole of Europe. And what are the worldly wise doing about that? Well, they're even making the problem worse, because they're giving even more detailed sex education, and they're teaching no moral values whatsoever now in schools. Indeed, any moral value is banned to be taught in schools, and they're wanting to lower the age of consent. Their policy made it worse, and seeing that it made it even worse, they're even going further in their policy to make it worse again. That is utter foolishness. The world's wisdom is foolishness. It's stupid. It is stupid. It's illogical. It doesn't make sense. Logically, you couldn't make sense of that. If you do a thing and it doesn't work the way you thought it would, in fact it ends up worse, the sensible thing to do is, after a while, you assess that and say, well, that didn't work, so let's do something different. That's the logical thing to do, but they're not logical, because the world's wisdom is foolishness. What about alcoholism? Look at the world's wisdom. What have they done in that area? In the year 2005, an alcoholic gets an extra £96 a week, or not a week, an extra £96 per Giro check. I think you get it every 2 weeks, but it basically doubles. What if you're not an alcoholic, you get half of that. An alcoholic, you get 90, whatever you get plus 96 extra. Now that was in the year 2005. You can imagine how much it is now. Just to buy alcohol. How's that going to help the alcoholic? Is that going to help them to get off the drink? Is it? You know what it's going to do? It's going to kill them. It'll make them worse and it'll kill them. And it's the same with drug addiction. Actually give them drugs, different kind of drugs to the drug addicts at great expense. You're going to kill the people. You're going to make the problem worse. They are and have made the problem far worse. And I give you loads of policies of our worldly ways, our leaders. And they're all foolish. Every single policy is foolishness, stupid, ridiculous. Doesn't even make common sense. Look at the wisdom of our society in general. Let's see, this is the proof that the world's wisdom is foolishness. It's foolishness with God, but it is actual foolishness. They're not clever. Don't give them too much credit. They're daft. The wisdom of society in general. What's in our society? What's the wisdom of society in general in this area? What is there after death? Nothing. That's their wisdom. Nothing. You live as you please. Live as if you're never going to die. Do everything you want to do. Have fun. Because you're just an animal anyway. That's their wisdom. And is that in reality wisdom, brethren? When your conscience tells you that there is something after death, and there has never been a people group or a tribe discovered in the whole world that didn't have a consciousness of a God and something after death. Because it's in the human psyche. It's in our DNA. History proves that men and women have a dignity far above the dignity of animals. Look at society, that proves that. Why live as if you'll never die when you know you will definitely die? It's the one great fact of life. You and me, we will die. To live as if you're not going to die, is that wisdom? That's folly. But it's the world's wisdom. The whole thinking of society is foolish, illogical, and blind. And it's a denial of the facts. But that is, of course, what we expect. Because the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. It is nonsense. It is absurd. It is stupidity, the word means. It is not wisdom at all. So let's not give the world too much credit for being wise when they're just not wise. Let no man deceive himself. If any man among you seems to be wise, in the wisdom of this world, let him become a fool that he may be wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. For it is written, he takes the wise in their own craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are vain, empty. There's no content, no substance to them. He takes the wise in their own foolishness. That's Job chapter 5, verse 13 he's quoting. And verse 20 in Corinthians, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are vain. That is Psalm 94 and verse 11. As it is written, as it is written. The Lord knows what the worldly wise think. And their thoughts are summarized as craftiness and vanity. Emptiness. And that's exactly, what the wisdom of this world consists of. Craftiness and vanity. Look at our politicians and look at our society if you want the evidence. Craftiness and vanity. Thirdly, therefore, verse 21 to 23. Therefore, in the light of this, writing to the church in Corinth, let no man glory in men, for all things are yours. Whether of Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world or life or death or things present or things to come, All are yours. And you're Christ's and Christ is God's. What's he saying here in these verses? He's saying to them, Corinthian Christians, why are you glorying in just one teacher of the gospel? One man. They're all yours. Paul, and the same meaning that they're all yours, it means it's all for your good. That's what the Greek word means. They're all yours for your good. Whether of Paul, or Apollos, or Cephas, or the world, or life. In all its fullness, or death, the gateway to heaven, or things present, or things to come, the future. Your inheritance is great, he's saying to them. So stop being petty and just following one wee silly teacher. Your inheritance is great. All things are yours. And remember also that you belong to Christ. And Christ to God. You are God's belongings and responsibility. So let me conclude for tonight. What's the teaching? To be wise, you must become a fool in the eyes of the world. And that means believe the gospel of Jesus Christ. The first step to wisdom. The reason? Because the world's wisdom is not wisdom, but is literally stupidity. Therefore, don't, as a Christian, glory in human beings or abilities, because you belong to God. You inherit all things. All things, life and death, everything works for your good. Death works for our good. Death is the gateway to glory. Let me give you a few examples then as I close. Brethren, remember this, God is on our side. I want to give you a few examples that just happened to me this week as wee examples of the foolishness of the so-called wise people in this world. Normally when I'm on the internet or you see comments under videos and stuff on YouTube, I don't get involved in that normally, but the odd time something catches my eye and I just think, well, I have to put a wee comment there. For example, on Monday night, I think it was, there was this video and it was about Richard Dawkins was doing a talk, and the atheistic professor or whatever. And one of the comments underneath was obviously written by a Christian, and the Christian said, this man and what he's saying is foolish. Foolish. Now, a person replied to that comment underneath, and against the Christian, and then they said a number of things, but they said, quote, you are using hate speech against Richard Dawkins. And then they defined what hate speech consists of and said, hate speech is anything that degrades or makes someone appear foolish. Anything that degrades or makes another human person appear foolish. So you're using hate speech against Richard Dawkins. So I seen this and I thought, well, I can't resist this. So I put my comment in answer to that underneath, and I said, if you really believe that hate speech, and I copy and pasted their own exact words, their own quote, that hate speech is anything that degrades or makes other people appear foolish, then surely will you not admit that Richard Dawkins is full of hate speech? Because everything he says makes anyone that believes in God appear foolish and degrades them. And I put a full stop and I said, now, surely if he would treat other people with respect, he might be treated with respect himself. Maybe he's just getting some of his own medicine. But I did that on Monday night, and of course the person has never answered. Because it's true. It's their own words back to them. But here's another one. This is my favourite. To see the wisdom of the world. These people that come on debating on the internet, you know what? They actually think they're clever. And they maybe are in the eyes of the world, in worldly wisdom, but worldly wisdom is folly. Listen to this one. This was another I actually started this one because there was another Richard Dawkins video, and the title of the video was this: someone as intelligent as Jesus Christ. This is a quote from Dawkins. Someone as intelligent as Jesus Christ would have been an atheist. That was Dawkins' quote. So I typed underneath in the comments in the public section, LOL, which means I'm having a good laugh. This guy is a joke. I don't know why he has such a following. His arguments are logically invalid. Now, within a couple of hours, another person answered what I'd put up, and they said underneath, give us an example. Give us an example of how Richard Dawkins' arguments are logically invalid. So I gave them an answer. Here's what I said. Hello, Mr. So-and-so, just their name. I'll not tell you their name. Hello, David Berlinski is one of the top scientists in the world today. He is not a Christian. He calls himself an agnostic, and yet he is not an atheist. In fact, he has written a book called The Devil's Delusion as a polemic, which is an argument, against Dawkins' books, showing how illogical Dawkins' arguments are. Hence my example is this. Dawkins' premise is this. Somebody as intelligent as Jesus would have been an atheist. End of quote. He is implicitly making the connection between intelligence and atheism. So therefore, are we expected to believe that David Berlinski or any other top academic like Peter Hitchens, that these people are not intelligent because they're not atheists? Of course, this is nonsense, logically and philosophically speaking. How much broader, I say, is Dawkins' conclusion than his premise? Therefore, his argument is logically invalid. It can easily be proven as a fact that atheism is not a measure of intelligence. Therefore, Dawkins is wrong. My argument proving my point is this. Number one, David Berlinski, Peter Hitchens, and Thomas Aquinas, and Blaise Pascal are and were all intelligent men. Point two, none of them were atheists. Conclusion, Dawkins' argument is a fallacy. I hope this helps you, Paul. You see, there's intelligent men who everyone has to admit are intelligent, but they're not atheists. So then they answered, they didn't get the argument, and they answered and said, oh, Reverend Paul has said that Dawkins' argument is logically invalid, not that one of his premises in the argument is wrong. So I'm still waiting for an answer. To which I added underneath, if a premise is wrong, that is an invalid argument. That is how logic works. And they still haven't replied. But you see, the world's wisdom is foolishness to such an extent that you can explain the facts so clearly and prove it, and they don't even get it. They don't even get the simple, basic, obvious. That's how foolish the world's wisdom is. You can prove it. You can show it. Because the only way out of the argument is to say, well, actually, David Berlinski, the top scientist in the world, it's not an atheist. And Thomas Aquinas, the Roman Catholic philosopher, who has a great argument for the argument of God. And the other men I mentioned, you have to actually say they're not intelligent. That's the only way out of the argument. You can't get out of it without saying those men are actually not intelligent. But they are intelligent. and they're not atheists. So therefore, intelligence is not measured by whether or not you're an atheist. Argument over. But the world's wisdom, they don't get it. I'm not mentioning this to get at the person. I'm being very nice to the person because I do hope that they take the things on board and learn from it if they're truly wanting to have an answer to their questions. Anyway, amen. Thank you for your attention tonight. The message is the world's wisdom's foolish, and if you think you're wise in this world, you need to believe the gospel, which is to become a fool in order to be truly wise. Okay, amen.